Well, we'll see if you are aware. It has to do with, well, at least my first questions kind of have to do with Zidane, Tantalus Thief, and
Assault suit.
yeah, who makes treasures if he gets given away?
Gotcha. Okay, so you have assault suit on Zidane.
Yeah.
And then, let's see, Assault Suit is the one that, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you may have that player gain control of equipped creature. Gotcha, okay. And then let me get the exact text on Zidane. It's Zidane. No.
Zidane.
A-N-E. Ah, that's what it is. I should have known that. Final Fantasy IX is like my favorite of the 3D Final Fantasies. I'm mad at myself for misspelling that. Let's see. When he enters, gain control. Okay, whenever an opponent gains control of a permanent.
I know what you're asking for, Autumn, but this isn't my my pod.
No, I got you.
Yes,
so you've got Zidane, and you've got it equipped with assault suit, and then it's the next player's turn. During their upkeep, you give them control of Zidane. Yeah. So what's gonna happen is, they gained control of it from you. You're gonna control that trigger. So in that instance, you are going to make the treasure. And then, is assault suit just until end of turn? Yeah, until end of turn. So then, in their cleanup, you're gonna get Zidane back. Yeah, and that means that they are gonna get a treasure during their cleanup.
Okay. Yeah. That's very
so,
cool. That's what I want.
Actually, just reading this guy, TS. It says at the end of Zidane, it says whenever an opponent gains control of a permanent from you create a treasure token. So since Assault Suit is equipped to Zidane, but you're going to give Zidane to that person, you still technically control Assault Suit, so you only get one treasure?
Correct, because anything attached to Zidane, that control has not changed. Right, but what I'm saying is that so you're going to get a treasure. So if I give Zidane to you, I get a treasure from giving it to you. And then when it returns back to me during the cleanup, when that until end of turn duration ends, you controlled Zidane at that time, so you get the treasure for me gaining control back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
actually, that's a fun little political thing to do.
Right, like I could give you Zidane to get a treasure, but when you give it back to me, yeah.
So in this case, in one whole rotation, upkeep, he gives it to the next person he's passing to.
Mm-hmm.
He gets the treasure on that person's end step. It goes back to Major.
During their cleanup, not the end step, but yes.
Right. So they get a treasure on their end step or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then when it goes to player, let's say Autumn is 1, 2, 3, 4 in play order.
Mm-hmm.
Player 3 would then get it on the upkeep.
Right.
He would Major would get the treasure. So
So during a full rotation, each of your opponents are getting one treasure each, and you're getting 3. Correct.
That's hot.
Neat. Okay.
That's hot. That's actually dope.
Yeah.
All right. Major, you said you had another question, or?
Yeah.
I'm hanging out.
Let me do this. Let me get Tyler's question, and then I'll be happy to jump back to yours. Okay.
So I'm not gonna lie, didn't know this was just like a question one. I didn't know if you were just like
Yeah, I'm just hanging out and answering questions that people have, so they don't have to interrupt a game for 20 minutes while people argue about it.
Correct, makes sense. So I've gotten conflicting things.
Sure.
My old play group, where I had a level 2 judge in the play group, and told me one way, and then just literally like a week ago maybe, some guy was playing it, and he had Branching Evolution out and Doubling Season out.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Now, what I'm understanding is that they're both replacement effects, and since you control those replacement effects, you choose one to trigger, the other one doesn't happen. If you were supposed to, if someone else had, it wasn't Doubling Season, it was Primal Vigor. So people
Branching Evolution and Primal Vigor?
Correct.
Okay.
So, what it was that I was telling him was that if you control both, they're both replacement effects, so you get to choose one, and that's all you get. But because of like your opponents, if they were to get 2, and that would somehow trigger also on your board, you would get then 4 or
Okay.
however many more.
Yeah. So this type of interaction, and I think I see where the confusion lies, is a lot of players confuse what happens when multiple triggers are happening controlled by different players versus what happens when multiple replacement effects are applying controlled by different players. So what you're saying is applicable to is similar to when triggers go on the stack, right? So if I control 2 things that trigger at the same time, even if they're affecting another player, I, the controller of those triggers, get to decide the order they go on the stack and consequently the order that they resolve and things like that, right? And one trigger may or may not cause the other one to change how it resolves, or if it resolves at all, depending on the exact triggers. When it comes to replacement effects, it works a little bit differently. So because replacement effects themselves are not using the stack, like the replacement effect is not going onto the stack. What's happening is a replacement effect is modifying an event as it's happening, like as the tokens are being put on, or as the counters are being put on. So in your example of Primal Vigor and Branching Evolution, as the counters are being put onto the object, both replacement effects want to apply to that event at the exact same time, right? The way it works with replacement effects is they both get to apply, but the controller of the affected object or the affected player is the one who decides the order in which they apply. Now, it is possible that applying one before the other could change how the other applies, or if it applies at all, but just applying one doesn't automatically negate the other just by virtue of applying. Now, it depends, right? Now, there's some things that could apply differently. So, for example, if you're attacking me and I have a thing that says, you know, all damage that would be dealt to me is reduced to 0, and there's something else that says all of your damage is tripled, right? Well, if I choose to have it reduced to 0 first, your damage tripler no longer applies because it no longer sees damage being dealt, right? So that's an example of where something could negate another replacement effect just by virtue of that. But in your example here, both of them want to double the number of counters. So if I control a Primal Vigor, you control a Doubling Season or Branching Evolution or anything else that says double the counters, and you are about to get a counter onto one of your creatures, right? Both of these replacement effects apply, and applying one before the other doesn't change anything. Now, they both get to apply, so 1 becomes 2 and 2 becomes 4. Now,
well, I could give you the example of what was happening in the game. I remember it very well.
Go ahead.
He was playing Voja, Jaw of the Conclaves, the white wolf.
Yeah, I know Voja.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Super cool deck, and when it went to his turn, or he did his triggers to have that trigger happen around the attack to get the counters, he had Primal Vigor and Branching Evolution. So I forgot where the counters exactly were at the time, but at the end of the resolving it, they were at like 12. And I want to say he said it multiplied it by 4.
So he already had 4 is what it sounds like.
That's what I'm thinking. I want to say it because he already had it with 1 trigger, and then in that turn he cast that 1 card and passed and went back to his turn. So yeah, I want to say it triggered 4 times, and he looked it up and he was saying the rules, numbers, and everything. I could not quote that to save my life. So I was wanting to make sure that he was right and that my friend was wrong.
Yeah,
maybe my friend was right in the situation we were playing years ago, but.
So here's how that would work out. So if I have Voja, actually it's funny, as I just recently assembled a Voja deck. If I have Voja in play and 4 elves, just to put an arbitrary number out there, right?
Yeah, right.
And no wolves other than Voja. Let's forget about the card draw. This is just about the counters, right? I have Voja and 4 elves, and Voja currently has 4 counters on it. You had Primal Vigor, I have Branching Evolution or some other counter doubler, right? I attack with Voja, I get a trigger, and that trigger looks at the number, as it resolves, it looks at the number of elves I control, and wants to put 4 1/1 counters on my creatures. Now, both the Branching Evolution and the Primal Vigor want to apply to that game event of putting 4 counters on my creatures, and since both of them double, it does not matter the order in which I apply them, right? Because I'm going to turn... I'm gonna apply them in whatever order I want because they both double. I'm gonna turn 4 into 8 and 8 into 16.
Okay.
Which will now give me a total of 20 counters on my creatures because I added 16 to the 4 that were already on them, right?
Correct.
Now the way that they apply could matter. Let's say instead of branching evolution, I had a hardened scales.
Yeah,
right.
that I know is different because it's only adding an additional.
Right, so that's where the math matters now, because I, as the affected player, get to decide the order in which I apply those replacement effects. So now, instead of 4, I could apply the Primal Vigor first, turn 4 to 8, and then apply Hardened Scales, turning 8 into 9. So then put 9 counters on all my creatures. Or I could apply Hardened Scales first, turn 4 to 5, and then apply the Primal Vigor, turning 5 into 10.
Right.
But I, as the affected player, am the one that gets to decide the order in which those replacement effects apply.
Okay, that right there, that's my confusion. So, you were saying in this example, you had the branching evolution and someone else had the primal vigor. This guy had both.
Okay.
So since he's the controller of both,
it doesn't change a thing. Whoever controls them doesn't matter. With replacement effects, it only matters who is controlling the affected object or who is the affected player.
Okay, so it basically, whatever permanent is triggering, the inactive player that's being affected gets to resolve those triggers.
Again, it's not a matter of resolving triggers. It is applying the replacement effects
as they don't use the trigger, right?
As the event is happening. Right.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, they get to resolve it as it's happening. They control the replacement effect in a sense?
No, they don't. It doesn't matter who controls the replacement effect. They just get to make the decision of how those replacement effects apply.
Okay, so the terminology you're using sounds like that's really important to make that.
It really is. It really is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me give you another example, just because the one example I want to give you is where this principle gets confused the most and where it applies most of the time. The one that causes the biggest kerfuffle or confusion or whatever you want to say is replacement effects involving damage. So this is where people argue the most. So let's say, for example, you and I are playing. I have a Torbran in play that says all my red sources get their damage added to 2. Right? I add 2 to all my red sources for damage. And I have a Fiery Emancipation that says triple all my damage. Okay?
Oh, this is important for me. I haven't had that.
Yeah. So if I lightning bolt you, right? I want to deal 3 damage to you. Now, I control both the Torbran and the Fiery Emancipation, and a lot of players will argue that because I control them, similar to if I controlled triggers, I should decide how they happen, right?
No, this is the person being afflicted, right?
Exactly, right. So for me, if I got to choose, I would apply Torbran first, turning the 3 to 5, and then Fiery Emancipation, turning the 5 into 15. If you, the player being affected, gets to choose, you would choose the Fiery Emancipation first, turning the 3 to 9, and then the Torbran, turning the 9 to 11. Now, getting hit with 11 still sucks, but it's not as bad as 15. No. And you, as the affected player, regardless of who controls the Torbran and the Fiery Emancipation, regardless of who's controlling these damage replacement effects, you, the affected player, get to decide how this applies.
Okay, now I did know that, and I am also curious, because I happen to have deck that just accidentally burns the world every time I seem to play.
Sure.
If I had my 3 friends playing, and one chooses to do the latter, taking 11 damage, but someone else wants me to kind of get in the game, like wants to help me out, she chooses to take 15. Can it be done that way? Or
they make their own individual decision. Yeah.
Cool.
It would be the same. Like let's say that you were dealing. Let's say you had your damage replacement effects, right? Let's say you're playing Torbran and Fiery Emancipation, and you play an End the Festivities, right? End the Festivities to deal 1 damage to each creature, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. For each of my creatures, I get to make a separate choice of how those things apply. So if I have a creature where if I choose the biggest number, it would die, but the smaller number, it would live, I want to choose the smaller number. But then I have another creature that if it takes a certain amount of damage, I get this trigger. Well, I'm going to have it take more damage, so I get the bigger trigger, and I can make separate decisions for those 2 different creatures off of that same effect.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I forgot you're recording.
It's not live. I edit. It's fine.
Okay, cool. So with that, I'm also curious now too, because I'm gonna try to kind of add both here. Fire Emancipation, Neheb, let's say Torbrand. My bad. Let's keep that normal.
Okay.
Torbrand, Fire Emancipation, and City on Fire, which both say triple
damage.
Instead.
Yeah.
How would this be?
The exact same way. If you have all of those things and you're damaging me or my stuff, I get to decide how they apply. So if I want the lowest number, I'm going to apply the damage triplers first and then apply Torbrand last to add 2 on top of it.
Okay.
If I have something where I care about how much damage it takes, and I want it to take the most amount of damage, I could apply Torbrand first and then the damage triplers to really increase that number. But that is a choice I get to make no matter who controls what. So, like, for example, let me throw one more thing at you just to kind of drive it home. Let's say that Major is, 3 of us are in a game, and you have Torbrand and Fire Emancipation, and Major is playing the Lightning from Final Fantasy, the one that deals and Lightning deals combat damage to me. So until their next turn, all the damage dealt to me gets doubled, right? So you swing and you attack me and hit me with a 3/3 creature, a 3/3 red creature. Torbrand's replacement effect, Fire Emancipation's replacement effect, and Lightning's replacement effect all want to apply to the damage that I am taking. It does not matter that you control 2 of those sources, 2 of those things with replacement effects, and Major controls the third. I still get to decide how all of them apply.
That's so good. Yeah, that's sick. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now, with the Fire Emancipation and the City on Fire, both of them being triplers,
it doesn't matter. The order
still applies. If it's 1 damage, it goes to 3, goes to then 9, and then add Torbrand, goes to 11.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
So if I'm scanning correctly, is that a Volrath?
That is Volrath, a Shapestealer, and summon Primal Odin.
Combat your turn, put a -1 counter on a creature. So turn, Volrath, the Shapestealer, becomes a copy of target creature with a counter on it. Except it's okay.
So I think I have to jump through some gymnastics, but basically my question is, if I manage to get Volrath to become a Primal Odin on upkeep, because you draw Saga triggers after, if Primal Odin is at 2, and I've already done it as a rotation to put 1 Saga counter on Volrath, and I pay to do it again, I'm wondering if Volrath keeps the second trigger.
Yeah, so the scenario you have is where, so you're saying you already have at least one, you already have 1 lore counter on Volrath from some sort of previous shenanigan, right? You've done something else to already get a lore counter on it. During your upkeep, you activate Volrath to turn it into a copy of Summon Primal Odin, and then you go, you upkeep, draw, and then at the beginning of your main phase, where sagas gain their lore counters, you put a lore counter on both Summon Odin and the Volrath copy of Summon Odin. So what happens is, let's focus on the Volrath copy because Odin does its own thing. The Volrath copy triggers the second, because it got its second lore counter, it triggers the second chapter ability. And when that trigger resolves, it gains the ability, in quotes, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. Now, at the end of the turn during cleanup, or is Volrath just till end of turn, or is it
tell rotation, tell my next turn, it stays as
until your next turn. Okay, yeah. So until your next turn. So basically, once your next turn starts, Volrath stops being a copy of Summon Odin. It still has 2 lore counters on it. Yeah. And it still has the ability, in quotes, that it gave itself. Because what's happening there is that type of an ability gives itself the ability in layer 6. And the fact that it is no longer Volrath, or not longer Volrath, but no longer Summon Odin, doesn't change the fact that it gave itself that ability. So it still has that ability to just cause someone to lose the game. I do a similar thing with a Thespian stage and a Urza's Saga, where I'll turn Thespian stage into a copy of Urza's Saga, let it get to the second chapter, where it gives itself the ability to pay 2, tap to make a token with power and toughness equal number of artifacts.
It car instructs, and then
Yep.
you just
And then you use the Thespian stage to turn it into any other land. And it's a copy of the other land you copied. It's no longer Urza's Saga, but it still has the ability to make constructs.
So, and if I use Volrath's ability to become other creatures, it will keep the...
It will keep that ability, yeah.
Ooh, I was taught and told that it would lose it, but that's cool.
No, so how familiar are you with layers?
Not at all. I'm
right.
a established Magic player, and I go out of my way to avoid layers. It is too confusing.
Let me give you just a brief kind of... I'm not going to go into super detail, but let me give you a brief primer on how layers work, okay? So when the game checks an object to see what characteristics it has, it goes through a checklist of sorts and looks at these layers, right? It goes all the way from starting with what's printed on the card, right? It starts with the characteristics of what's printed, and if there's no modifications to it, that's the end of it. It doesn't need to really check anything else, but it does. Layer 1 is the copyable layer. So, for example, if I have a Volrath, for example, when Volrath becomes a copy of another creature, it is changing itself entirely in layer 1. Right? So if you have Volrath become a copy of a creature, it changed all of its characteristics, except it still has that ability that it has. But it becomes the mana value, the name, the color, the creature type, the card type, the abilities that are printed on that card, all of those things it picks up and makes its change in layer 1. If you then have a clone enter the battlefield as a copy of your Volrath, that's a copy of something else, it picks up all those copyable characteristics. Okay, but well, that's another thing. So layer 2 is like control changing effects. Layer 3, that's where like Zidane and stuff like that. Layer 3 is your text changing. That's where like Deadpool does its thing. Layer 4 is the type changing, so something that says like target creature becomes an elf until end of turn. That's a type changing effect. Layer 5 is anything that changes the color of an object. Layer 6 is where you gain or lose abilities. Layer 7 is going to be the power toughness, and that's broken up into some sub layers here. I'm not going to get into a whole... Well, actually, Volrath does affect that as well. No, because that's all part of its copyable effect. But anyway, so as the game checks the characteristics of an object, right, it goes through a checklist from top to bottom and applies everything as it should. So every time state-based actions checks, it goes through this checklist, okay? Now, Volrath's copy ability does everything in layer 1. Like I said, so if I have a Spark Double come in as a copy of the Volrath, and Volrath is currently copying something else, it comes in as the copy of the thing Volrath is copying. But it still has, except it has that ability because that's part of the copy effect. But it never reverts back to vanilla Volrath, right? It just is whatever Volrath was already a copy. But in your situation where Volrath turned into that creature saga and then resolved its chapter 2 ability, right? Resolving that ability has nothing to do with the copy effect that has a duration. Layer 6 says, all right, gains the ability.
TS, where you been at? I haven't seen you in forever.
Hey, what's going on, man? Let me answer his question real quick, and then we'll catch up. No problem. So Volrath, as part of being a copy of that creature saga, when it resolves that saga, it doesn't say that like when you resolve that chapter, it just kind of has this ability, right? It says it gains the ability, which means it is giving a separate instance in layer 6 of that ability, and there's no time frame to how long it has that ability. So on your next turn, when Volrath goes back to being vanilla Volrath, nothing removed that ability that it gave itself while it was that saga. So it kept it. The only time it's ever going to lose it is if it changes zones. So if it leaves and comes back or anything like that, then it loses that ability. Or if something specifically says, like if I put a Kenra's transformation on your Volrath, in addition to turning it into a 3/3 elk, it says and loses all abilities. It will then lose the ability that it had previously gained. Does that?
Okay.
Like I said, there's more to it as far as layers go, but in that particular instance, this is what happens. Because Volrath gave itself a separate ability that has nothing to do with the time limit of the copy effect. When it goes back to being Volrath, it doesn't lose that ability.
And you said if I pay 1 to have Volrath become something else, it still keeps that. Okay.
Yep, for sure. So you could here's the dumb thing, right? Is you turn during your upkeep, that when it's already got the one lore counter, you turn Volrath into that saga creature, let it gain that ability, and then before combat use the Volrath ability to turn it into a copy of some other unblockable creature, and it still has that ability to cause someone to lose the game when you deal combat damage to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty deadly.
That is player removal right there, buddy. Yep.
Yes, I thought you were a nice Magic player. I don't know why I assumed you'd be a nice player.
I don't know what I did to give you that impression.
It's the nice little laugh. You sound like a group hug. Fun, because you're a judge, you know the rules. You're like, look, I'm just playing fun stuff here. I'm just chilling. Like, you don't want me to get mean, or else it's going to get rough for everybody.
Look. One of the reasons I did a deep dive into the rules, and one of the reasons I like to share this information, is because having a better understanding of how these rules work has empowered me to do really dumb things to my friends, and I want to empower you to do dumb things to your friends.
Every so often I'll have like a random question, because there's always new stuff coming out and the game's constantly changing. But I've been playing for so long, it's like muscle memory for me at this point, like the stack, this and that.
Sure.
Which brings me to my question. I actually have a question for you.
So real quick, Major, does that answer what you had?
I guess pretty much, but it does. Apparently, I might have been playing Volrath long. So, does Volrath lose his first ability when he becomes other things? Because I've always had him lose at the beginning of each combat. He puts a -1 counter.
It does lose that ability. It does. Yeah, because the only thing that Volrath keeps, it says, when you use the copy ability, until your next turn, Volrath the Shapeshifter becomes a copy of target creature with a counter on it, except it's a 7/5 and has this ability. This ability referring to the copy ability that that text is part of. So Volrath, if you turn Volrath into something else during the main phase or upkeep phase like that, you won't get the beginning of combat trigger because Volrath won't have that ability. Right. Now you could go into combat, let Volrath's trigger go into the beginning of combat, have Volrath trigger and give something a -1/-1 counter, and then still in the beginning of combat, before you declare attackers, use Volrath's ability to turn it into a copy of the thing you just gave -1/-1 counter to. And then go to declare attackers that now is a copy of that. You could do that if you wanted, but if you turn him into a copy of something during your upkeep or main phase, you don't get to get the beginning of combat trigger because he doesn't have that ability at that time.
Okay, so I have been playing that right. That's good to know.
Yeah, go ahead, Kree. What's up?
All right, so I recently upgraded a deck of mine, Purr and Toothy.
Yep, okay.
And I was interested with Purr and Sagas. Now, it's my understanding, because Read Ahead is specific, you can't double dip with Read Ahead Sagas, but you can with the normal Sagas. Is that correct?
So, let me double check the text on these things.
Because Purr adds a counter to your permanent. So say I played a Saga, it comes in with a counter, but because of Purr, it automatically gets 2, which kind of makes me do both. chapters, and I can stack them how I want. But my thing is with read ahead, because the way read ahead is worded, you can't do that, I believe.
Yeah, let me hang on. What is the rest of Pier's name? It's Pier.
Imaginative Rascal.
Yeah.
He's a little rascal.
Yeah. Pier Imaginative Rascal. Let's see. If one or more
Check
counters.
this out.
Nice. If one or more counters would be put on a permanent your team controls, that many +1 of each of those. Okay. And then let me double check the exact text on read ahead. Let me make sure I get the exact wording on that. Hang on.
Cause yeah, I was playing Toothy, and I wanted to make the deck more to where they both can act independently instead of them both, and also both work together to do the thing with Toothy, you know, make them big, kill someone. But I wanted Per to be more independent, you know. I wanted him to just do more than to stand next to Toothy all day. So I was like, let's do sagas, and it's an interesting build to go. Oops,
right,
mostly sagas and planeswalkers.
Read ahead means chapter abilities of this saga can't trigger the turn it entered the battlefield unless it has exactly the number of lore counters on it specified in that chapter symbol. Okay, yeah. So this is what happens: is let's say you like you said before, if you have just a normal saga without read ahead, enter. It normally would enter with 1 lore counter on it. Pier looks at that and goes, actually, it enters with 2, and because of how sagas work, if you would get both chapters 1 and 2 triggering at the same time, you get to put them on the stack however you want, so consequently resolving it however you want. Now, read ahead, like I just read there, read ahead specifically allows you to have it enter with any number of the lore counters on it, right? Except the way read ahead works is any chapter ability except for the specific number of lore counters it enters with don't get to trigger. So if you have it enter with read ahead,
you don't get the double dip. So you say you have it read ahead, you start on chapter 2, you don't get chapter 1 like you would with the normal saga. You don't get the double dip.
Right.